So we've already discussed the coordinate plane, graphing rational numbers on the coordinate plane. You have a good understanding of how to do those. One of the things that we use for the coordinate plane is the ordered pairs. Well, today we're going to be looking at the relationship between those, looking at reflections and such. Okay? So how you can use those ordered pairs to help you just a little bit. So here is our coordinate plane. Okay, so as we're looking at the coordinate plane here, we want to notice a couple of things about it. Okay, as far as the pieces of this coordinate plane. Okay, so that's kind of an important thing here. Now, they are broken, you'll notice, into 4 sections. Each one of those sections is called a quadrant. Okay, quad means 4, so each one is broken into a quadrant. So this is quadrant 1, and then it counts counterclockwise. So this is quadrant 2, this is quadrant 3, and then this is quadrant 4. Now you'll notice that we use Roman numerals. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now let's look at how can you determine the quadrant of an ordered pair. Basically, how can you determine its location or relative location just by looking at the ordered pair? Never graphing it, never even seeing the coordinate plane. You can just look at that ordered pair and look at the signs, look at the negatives and the positives, and you know already generally about where it's going to be. All right, so let's look for just a second and let's take quadrant 1. Okay? Quadrant 1, well, here are my x values for quadrant 1. Okay? All of these, forever and ever. Are these positive or negative? Okay? Well, if this is my origin, and that's 0, and I'm counting right, they get positive, right? So for quadrant 1, the x values will always be positive. Now, for quadrant 1, I'm going to count up, right? Here's my origin, and if I count up, is that positive or negative? Well, again, it's positive. So for quadrant 1, both numbers will always be positive. Right? So let's go to quadrant 2 now. My x values, left, right, always first. Here's my origin. Am I counting negative or positive? Well, it's negative. So my first number, the x value, will be negative here. My y value is still counting up, so it's still positive. I go down to quadrant 3. Well, same location on x, it's negative. But look what's happened. Now I'm counting down, and down is negative, so they're both negative. And then quadrant 4, well, my x's are over here. We're back to positives. But my y's are still down, negatives. All right, so first quadrant, positive, positive. Second quadrant, negative, positive. Third quadrant, negative, negative. And fourth quadrant, positive, negative. If you get a good visualization of that in your mind, all right, stare at that for just a little while. And just keep staring. Stare a little longer. Okay, stare at those positive, positive, negative, positive, and really think about, okay, again, we've got a vertical number line. Here's 0. Well, everything above 0 is positive. Everything below 0 is negative. Here we have a horizontal number line. Everything to the right of 0 is positive. Everything to the left of 0 is negative. Overlap those. Quadrant 1, everything's going to be positive. Quadrant 2, negative, positive. Quadrant 3, negative, negative. Quadrant 4, positive, negative. If you'll look what we have here. Notice how these two quadrants are opposite of each other. Right? Positive, positive, negative, negative. And then look at these two here. Aren't they the opposite of each other? Negative, positive, positive, negative. Okay? Those are reflections of each other, actually. And we'll get to that in just a moment. So let's look at this, and let's determine its quadrant just by looking at the ordered pair. So negative 4, positive 3. Okay, so visualize yourself starting at the origin, right? and you've got to go to negative 4. So are you going to go left or are you going to go right? Well, I'm going to have to go left. And then I'm going to go positive. So is that going to put me up or is that going to put me down? That's going to put me up. So for this one, I'm going left and up, which tells me that is quadrant 2. Okay? Because it's negative, positive. Here I've got positive 1, positive 2. Okay? So go again into your mind, visualize, start yourself at the origin, walk yourself to 1. Okay? Did you walk right or did you walk left? Well, I walked right. Okay, hopefully you did too. Now I'm going to walk up or down. Well, I'm going to walk up. So if I walk right up, that puts me in quadrant 1. Negative 3, negative 3. Okay, start yourself at the origin, visualize it. I'm walking from the origin. Am I going left or right to get to negative 3? I got to go left. Now, am I going to go up or down to get to negative 3? I'm going to go down. So I have gone left, down. That puts me at quadrant 3. Okay, visualize it again. 4. Am I walking right or am I walking left? I'm walking right into positives. Negative 3. Am I going up or down? I'm going down. So I'm going positive, negative. That puts me in quadrant 4. Okay, and then lastly here, okay, notice that I have these rational numbers here, these fractions and stuff. Don't worry about that. Okay, I mean, it doesn't change the quadrant just because there's a fraction there. Negative 3.5. So I've got to go left to get to negative 3, and I've got to go down to get to negative 2. That puts me in quadrant 3. Okay? So that's really what we're looking at here. I'm looking at negative, positive, 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 negative, 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 negative. But did you notice how, take the time to stop and go, okay, if I started at the origin, which way would I walk? Visualize yourself moving to that point. Okay? It takes just a couple of seconds, but it's a good thing. Eventually, yeah, you wouldn't have to visualize it, but while you're starting out, it's okay. It's needed. It's expected. You should. It's going to help you, okay, to kind of visualize where you're headed there on that coordinate plane. Now, I mentioned a word earlier called reflections. Okay? When you reflect on the coordinate plane, it's kind of like taking that coordinate plane and you're folding it. Okay? Essentially, you're just folding it. Okay? So if I'm going to reflect a point, that point is the same distance from the origin, but it's on the opposite side of the x or y. Okay, so maybe I have it down here in the fourth quadrant, and I'm going to fold it up to the first quadrant. Or I'm going to fold it over to the third quadrant. That's a reflection. Okay, notice that I said that the distance is the same. So what that will mean is, okay, here's a coordinate plane here. What that will mean is the absolute values will actually stay the same. The only thing you're going to notice that changes is actually the signs of those numbers. When you reflect across the x, your y value will change. It'll either change to the opposite, either negative or positive. If you reflect y, your x will change to the opposite. Okay, so let's take an example here. 3, 3. Okay, if I want to reflect 3, 3, okay, let's say I want to reflect it across the x. I'm going to take it and I'm going to fold it. Well, guess what? That's not going to change the x value because it's still going to be on that same line. Okay? It didn't move. Okay? What did move is that it suddenly went down here to negative 3. 3, negative 3. So notice, same distance from the origin. My x value did not change. Okay? I reflected across the x. Reflect the x. What changed was my y. This went to the opposite. It went from positive 3 to negative 3. Okay? That's what changed. Let's reflect it across the y. Okay? So I'm going to take it, I'm going to fold it over there. Well, in this situation, it's going to stay on that same line right there, right? So my y value will not change. It's on the same line. My x value, okay, if I reflect y, the x changes. So I'm going to take the opposite. -3, 3. Let's put that into practice here. Okay. Tell which axis is reflected. So you'll notice that I have the first ordered pair there, 6, 3, and then my reflected ordered pair is -6, 3. Now, what I notice that has changed is my x value. Okay, notice that I have the opposite. This is still the same. So if the x changed, that tells me I reflected across the y. And I know that sounds confusing, right? Your x changed, so you would think it should be my x that I reflected across, but it's not. Okay, my x value changed to the opposite, so I reflected across the y. Okay, I look here, -4, -4. Those are the same. This, -3, 3. Those are the two that are different. So my y value is what's changed, which means I reflected across the x. -5, -5, that's not different. Here it is though. If you reflect across x, y changes. If you reflect across y, x changes. Well, in this case, I reflected across the x because my y is what changed. Let's try one more situation similar to that. Okay, give the new coordinates after the reflection. So here we go. We have -6, -8, and we're going to reflect across the y-axis. Well, I know the absolute values are going to be the same. So I know it's going to have those two numbers. That's not going to change. Y-axis. My x is what's going to change. So y will stay the same. X will change to the opposite. So it's going to go from -6 to +6. All right, so let's go down to here. -5, 8. Well, again, I know the absolute values are going to stay the same. So I know those two numbers are going to be there. I'm going to reflect the x-axis. X-axis reflected, y changes. So I need to make this +8 into a -8, and this -5 is just going to stay the same because it's not going to change. X-axis, change the y. Last one, I'm going to reflect the x-axis, which means my x will stay the same. In this case, that's okay. My y will change to the opposite. Make that a negative. All right. So let's review a couple of those main points there. Right. When I am reflecting, absolute values stay the same. The only thing that changes are the signs. If I reflect x, y changes signs. If I reflect y, x changes the signs. Right. And then let's review those quadrants as well. Okay. Quadrant 1, positive, positive. Quadrant 2, negative, positive. Quadrant 3, negative, negative. Quadrant 4, positive, negative. Okay? With the reflections, with the ordered pairs, again, take the time to just visualize it. And then, you know what? If you have to sketch it out, okay, so let's say we had a situation like this where we were determining those ordered pairs and you were like sitting there trying to visualize yourself walking and you just couldn't do it. You know what you could do? Just a little rough ordered pair there, or a coordinate plane, excuse me. And you can say, okay, well, -4 is going to be, that's going to be over here. +3, it's somewhere in there. That's the second quadrant. That's okay. Okay, draw a picture. Don't be afraid to draw pictures. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so hopefully this gives you a better understanding of ordered pairs, reflections, and how all those ordered pairs relate to one another.